Today at Soulfront, myself and Jane Halford, who is the founder of Halford Consulting, are going to explore a topic that's very important and dear to Jane, which is leadership transition. She has her own personal story and extensive experience in this area as a board member, chartered accountant, regulator, entrepreneur. Her passion and her breadth of experience is extensive. And what Jane looks to do in her business is to serve boards and CEOs to accelerate the performance and improve the success of their incoming leaders. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming and being a part of today. I just wanted to go into some ideas that I think that you love and I love too. And, specifically, I think leadership is what we want to dive into a little bit today. Could you maybe link a little bit of your background into leadership and then also talk a little bit about how that has taken you to leadership transitions? I've always been fascinated of how you built your business and why that means so much to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as a chartered accountant, and so I spent the first 10 years helping owner-managed clients. And then I had the opportunity to join the regulatory body, which sounds really boring, but it was fantastic. 2 years into that, our CEO decided to step down from his role. And at that time, I was 33 years old, and I thought, wouldn't it be great someday if I could be the CEO of this organization? So I had nothing to lose, so I put my name in the ring, assuming they were going to, hire a 55-year-old guy who could mentor me, and someday the board would understand that's where I wanted to go. But to my surprise, they hired me. And so I became a CEO without going through all of the levels to get there. And so I found myself now not only in a CEO role, but in a role that had interprovincial relationships and, relationships with the government, relationships with, 8,000 members and a public image. And I was not prepared for that. And so I felt like I had to go on this leadership journey that was far faster. And so I had to surround myself with mentors, with coaches, with professionals to help me get there so that I could represent my organization well. And so at that point, and from there forward, I've just been so passionate about leadership because it is really the thing that we need to do, whether you're leading in your family or leading in your community or leading at the office. And I realized that I didn't come up with that training. And so I always now want to pay it forward on the leadership side to make sure that others, whether they're in the beginning of their career, mid, or towards the end, that they're bringing their best so that their organizations are well served.
Now, when you went through that experience where you were put into the deep end of the swimming pool with an organization, you're young, you're in your 30s, you probably went through that and it was a school of hard knocks. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. The things that I thought would be hard were the things that I knew about. It was all the things that I didn't know about being a CEO that were the hardest part, because you're not even anticipating them. So you're right. You kind of get knocked down by them, or you're not effective and you think I need to do better next time. And so, one of them, wasn't a bad experience by any stretch, but I never reported to a board. I'd been on boards. And so now I'm reporting to a board. So what did they need? And what's my role in that? Just a lot of questions. And so they were very, very generous with their time and their mentorship to make sure that we got to the right rhythm. But, in the end, I wish I would have known more about that. And that's just one example of many.
Yeah, I was looking into it, and leadership's a big space. It's like a $366 billion industry. It's massive. Whether it's coaching, whether it's communication, employee engagement, business acumen, and 40% of new CEOs who enter the market, they actually fail within the first 18 months, which is staggering. And then also you have executives. It's at 50% when they move into their new roles. So when you came out the other side of that and you finished your experience as the CEO, did you realize that this was happening to an industry, that this was happening to more than just yourself, being kind of new into the role? Like, at what point did you start realizing that there's a gap?
Well, I spent 7 years in that role as a CEO, and it was only after I left, and I would get curious to say, is difficult entries and difficult exits of CEOs something I just experienced, or is this a normal thing? And I started to reflect on places where I'd been on the boards and we'd brought in new CEOs, and I thought, well, I didn't do anything to help them. So out of curiosity, started researching that, and I came across the exact same evidence that you did, Scott, around 40% failure rate. And the worst part in that is that statistics have been the same in North America for 15 years. So that's not a hiring issue, that's a systems problem. And that's where I really got the spark to say, but who's fixing this? Because you think about the great leaders we have across our organizations, across our geographies, and if we're taking great people and letting them fail, that's bad for everybody. And so I really felt a calling to try to fix that. And that's really what started the whole pathway back in now 2013 to say, how are we going to create solutions so that those leaders can arrive safely, perform better and faster, and then when they leave behind that critical information so that the next person can succeed quickly as well. So it's that evolving positive spiral rather than the negative spiral.
Mm-hmm. When, if that was something that I was interested in, the one thing I'd be thinking is, where do I start? Like, when I was reading a little bit in Forbes, and they're saying context conquers content, too much reflection and not enough application, underestimating culture, and what gets measured gets done. Like, those are some ways you can think about trying to make things work when you are bringing new people in, but that's pretty broad. Like, where do you start? Like, how do you figure out how to help these people?
I think I've tried to, over the years, simplify it so that people can remember to just do something. So the first thing is to acknowledge that you can do something, because a lot of us will sit back and wait for the new leader. Some of that's out of respect because they're a new boss, or sometimes we think that, we've hired a talented person, so they would be offended if we help them. I don't know how Canadian cultural that is, but I think that just knowing that you can do something is the first start. And then, any of those articles, my favorite article is the Harvard Business Review from maybe about 5 years ago now, called Onboarding Isn't Enough. And honestly, if somebody would just read that article and apply the lessons learned in that, there's even a self-assessment there that says, how ready are you? But the idea is, the things that leaders stumble on are things that we know and things that we could tell our leaders. So culture is certainly one of them. But, I also think about, the history of the organization. I've seen people arrive into organizations where the history, or especially if it's rooted in, a cultural background or religious background, if they're not from that background, they can easily, not get the language right, not get the customs right. And then they stumble, and even though they're top talent, it helps them fail fast. And so we search and we search and we search for these great people, and then we fail to recognize the key pieces of information that they need. So putting voice to what you already know. So I always find that leadership transition is a really enabling practice. The people in the organization already know these things. They just need to know that it's okay for them to voice it and to share, and that we're all in this together to help our new leader.
Yeah. When a leader gets in this type of position, because you've gone out to clients of yours, and not only have you experienced it yourself, but you have spoken to leaders who are going through this journey. I think that a lot of people in these positions, you'd think from the outside in, they have quite a bit of confidence and they have drive. But when they go through that process of trying to figure out the organization, even when you're helping them along, what do they go through? Like, what are they experiencing? And is like, what's the journey like? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think really the starting point is helping them understand where they are. So what are they familiar with and what are they not? So for example, an internal candidate who's been promoted, they know the culture of the place, they know the history, so we don't need to teach them that. but they will not have seen the company from their new job. So if they've suddenly become the CEO, let's identify places in the organization that they're not familiar with. Or if their job now requires a public image, like, can we get the media training? So really having that sense of what they don't have familiarity with, and coming with ideas around, is that important to them or is it not? And does it fit in the priorities of what they have to do in the first 90 days or 100 days? So it almost is like you see yourself more as a partner with that new leader to say, here's some options for you about things you may not know. How can I help you connect with somebody who can find those solutions for you? The same would be true if somebody is moving location. So if they're coming into a new city or a new province, what do they need to know about the political environment, the business environment? Same thing if somebody's coming new to an industry. So helping them understand what their learning gap is and helping them fill it. So it's not to say the person is broken or not good. No, they're hired because they are a superstar. But even superstars need help accelerating.
Yeah. How about the team dynamic? Is that an important component? Introducing them to the team or the groups of teams within the organization to help them be supported. Like, how do you manage that? How does it typically happen, and how should it happen?
I think that the magic factor in leadership transition is in fact the team, because you think about the top 10 or 20 people that are closest to that role. They are people that can empower the new leader through knowledge, through introductions, just through being a sounding board for them. And the interesting thing is that those 10 to 20 people, this isn't the hierarchy. This isn't necessarily all the direct reports. It can be an executive assistant. It can be the receptionist. It can be a frontline worker. But if there is a perspective that leader needs to have, the team already has that information. They just usually aren't asked to help. And so really enabling them and say, you know what, everybody wants their new boss to be successful. So let's actually be proactive and get ourselves organized on that rather than sitting back and waiting. Because I think we've all seen it in our careers. Normally you sit back and you wait and you polish your resume in case you don't like your new boss. Well, what a terrible feeling. Like, why don't we all get excited about this new boss and say, hey, from my perspective, I'm going to contribute this. And I see that that's of value. My colleague's going to contribute something different. And so really getting the momentum behind that leader as soon as you know who they are, or as soon as you actually know your boss is leaving, because it sometimes doesn't even matter who the next person is. That next person is going to be new and they're going to need help. So really just really giving people the courage, the confidence, the permission to step forward and say, I'm part of this leader's success.
Now, I also took a look at the Harvard Business Review, and I came across this article, which was the 7 surprises for new CEOs. And I thought this was both kind of hilarious because I'm not dealing with it, and also quite interesting. But the 7 surprises are 1, you can't run the company. 2, giving orders is very costly. 3, it's hard to know what's going on. 4, you're always sending a message. 5, you are not the boss. 6, pleasing shareholders is not the goal. It's to manage and improve the company. And then 7, you're still only human. So, I mean, I thought that this is, kind of maybe the playing field that people would enter when they're becoming a new leader, especially at the CEO level. What are ways to help these leaders navigate or think about the new environment?
Yeah, if you get the luxury of time before their first day, that's where the organization can provide them that background material. So, whether that's reading about where we are strategy-wise, or, even reading about biographies of their team, anything that they can do to prepare, do their homework in advance. You don't always have that because sometimes people are coming from other jobs or they're moving cities. So if you don't have time, then really just saying, what is most important that this person needs to know right now? So what's most important to their first week? What's most important to the first 30 days? And to help them understand that, because most times we magically think that the leader will know what's most important. Well, there's a whole bunch of people around that leader who probably do. So have that conversation up front, and then help them understand where there are internal experts that can help. So for example, maybe there's operational expertise or financial expertise. Well, maybe they don't need to focus their time on that, but maybe there's a critical issue with the board that they need to do with, or right now there's a pandemic. So we need the new leader in today's world, lead the pandemic. We've got the general operations, or lead our reputation. We've got, the people strategy. And so really trying to have that dialogue, because then it takes the pressure off. Because if you just look at that list of 7, like, no one person is going to do those 7 well. And so where can we offer them assistance up front so that they can come authentically? I mean, that's really the key, is if they can come authentically, including saying, I don't know, or who can help me, or where would I find out this information, then they won't set off a whole chain reaction accidentally. Because you see that sometimes leaders come in and they feel like they have this agenda and they start changing things before they understand. And even if the changes are right, they send a message to their people that I'm going to change first and learn second. And the more we can, seek first to understand, even if a quick decision is needed. Like, so maybe we need to make a decision today, but who do I need to talk to in the next hour to take that decision? And even the fact you've reached out as a new leader says, you know what, I didn't have a lot of time, but I tried this method. And you can send a lot of really positive messages, even if you don't have the luxury of your normal style of working, especially right now.
I was also curious, and you mentioned it, the idea of the pandemic and how that's going to leave open, right now there's going to be people who are not working, maybe they've lost their jobs, and there's going to be new opportunities for leadership. How does leadership transition change in this environment? How is it different?
Yeah, the application can be quite different, because right now, you've already had people announcing retirements before the pandemic hit. So they're leaving anyways, and somebody is coming. And you think about whoever's coming, they may be in a different city right now or different country. They certainly are never going to meet their team in person right now. They may not even know where the office is. So you think about a leadership transition is, 40% failure rate in good times. What's it going to be in tough times? But the principles that we just talked about helping and being proactive and identifying where you can support the new leader, those principles apply regardless of the scenario. So I think that empowering the team, having some online calls with the team, with the person, and just trying to share that information, it would be nicer to meet in person, absolutely. But if that's not possible, let's just take the time and do it. And I think a really good mental model that I think works with people, especially when they're super busy like they are right now, even if you spent 15 minutes a week talking about this and working on it, there would be time well spent before the leader arrives. Because 15 minutes, like, you could be very purposeful as a group to say, who's got what, who knows what, how can we get this forward? And just even the message it sends to the new leader that we've got your back. I think there's a way that we can do that. So principles are the same, application is different, and do it quickly and efficiently.
Are there different modes of communication that you've been looking at, just personally with your own business, or with communicating between leaders, just to make it better? I think we're all learning. I think we're in a process of just trying to figure this thing out. But
I think one of the fun things about the current world is that, we are only connecting virtually. So regardless of the platform, like this video call, the fact we can do workshops online, the fact we can still interrelate with each other, I think to me that's a key. Because the leader, they can literally be at their house too and being engaged in the process. And yet it's very human. Like, you can still see their home. You can still have their dog barking in the background. And actually it's an insight to this person that you might not have, and likewise insight to their team. So I think that where I've really seen a bigger shift is where we can have these online dialogues. And, a lot of the digital platforms are allowing breakout rooms. So even, essentially a speed dating, get the new leader on the line with their teammates and put them into smaller rooms and have, a quick Q&A session. Like, this is who I am, or this is what you need, or here's what we were thinking, and have them move around the rooms while the other team members are brainstorming. And I've seen that work really well. And the other thing I've seen work really well is that, you can reach people that you didn't think you could reach because everybody's at home. So don't be hesitant to ask for more involvement. So if you think that, a board member is the right person to help, or an executive is the right person to help, or maybe the retired leader is somebody available, chances are they're within steps of their computer. And chances are we all need something to do that's interesting and fun. So I'm actually finding a huge amount of success with people participating in ways that we would have never got them if the world was wide open, because they'd be traveling, they'd be out socializing, they'd be, running around with their families, and they're just not. So I think we need to be bold and confident and say, this is the ideal person, and let's go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting how constraints can breed creativity.
Yep.
One thing I'd just like to ask is, where do you see the future of leadership transition? Like if you're going to kind of go to that golden place where this is where I'd like to see improvements in leadership transition, and these are going to be the results.
I love that. The ideal picture. The ideal picture to me is that this would be something that was top of mind every time we hired somebody, regardless of their role. How are we going to help them arrive in a way that's holistic, in a way that's very purposeful, that's very engaged, and that it becomes just a new norm? And the only thing I can really compare it to is, if you go back 5-10 years, the amount of conversation around a board table around risk management was much less than it is today. There's no board that's not talking about risk. And so I'd love it to be that same level of engagement to say, oh, new leader, transition. New leader, we have to do something. And so to me, that would be the ideal, because the more we get it normalized, the more people will say, oh, wait a minute, I may not know exactly what to do, but there must be somebody. So let me Google that. Let me find some resources, and that they can just empower themselves to take care of it. So my ideal is that I worked myself out of a job on this, and that I could go solve a different world issue. I think it'll be a while, but that's okay.
That's wonderful. Jane, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time and having a great conversation with me. And I'll have all the details for Halford Consulting and your videos. And I'm excited to see what you do from here.
Thank you so much. It's been fun to chat, and have a great week.
You too.